This episode of the Drone Radio Show podcast is presented by Pix4D, the world's leader in 3D mapping software for UAV professionals. Meet other users, try the latest products, and chat to developers at the first Pix4D user conference. Get your early bird tickets at pix4d.com/radio.
What happens if we get up tomorrow morning and the headline says, great news, the FAA really fast-tracked and they have now integrated unmanned systems into the national airspace, ready, go fly. Well, are we ready for that?
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 217. What can we learn from efforts to promote UAS Economic Development in Virginia? For that question, we turn to Tracey Tynan, Director of the Virginia Unmanned Systems Center. Housed at the Center of Innovative Technology, the Virginia Unmanned Systems Center serves as a unified voice and source for information and assistance related to the unmanned systems landscape in Virginia. Tracey has more than 15 years' experience in economic and community development, and she is responsible for instilling an entrepreneurial culture regarding unmanned systems across the Commonwealth. In this role, her main focus is to increase collaboration and communication among the various entities engaged with unmanned systems. In this edition of the Drone Radio Show, Tracey talks about the Virginia Unmanned Systems Center and the efforts to promote UAS economic development. Joining Tracey in this podcast is Marco Rubin, Senior Investor Director at the Center for Innovative Technology. But before we hear from Tracey and Marco, I want to thank those of you who are supporting my funding campaign. Now you have the option of making a one-time donation in any amount by going to droneradioshow.com/donate. Whether it's $1, $100, or much more, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. And if you'd like to make a monthly contribution, you can still go to patreon.com/droneradioshow. So let's learn about the efforts to promote UAS economic development in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Tracey and Marco to introduce themselves.
My name is Tracey Tynan, and I am the Director of the Unmanned Systems Center at CIT in Virginia, which is the Center for Innovative Technology, CIT.
My name is Marco Rubin, Senior Investment Director with the Center for Innovative Technology. I'm part of the equity investment team, and I lead investments in the aerospace sector.
Before we get into the Virginia Unmanned Systems Center, tell us about the Center of Innovative Technology.
The CIT is a private company funded by the Commonwealth of Virginia by taxpayers. The organization has an economic development mission, and there are a variety of business divisions. Tracey leads the UAS side. I'm in the equity investment side. We also have a broadband group, and we also are involved in the grant writing business, grant supporting business, and we actually do allocate capital as well in that area.
How does the Virginia Unmanned Systems Center fit into the CIT?
So we are a fairly new entity that was brought in under the CIT umbrella. And I came on board just this past August, so just about 10 months ago. But it seems like sort of the perfect location as the Center for Innovative Technology is obviously looking to support and grow technology in Virginia. And so we are now part of that organization, which actually reports to the Secretary of Commerce and Trade in Virginia.
Why was the center created?
It became increasingly obvious that across the Commonwealth, we had a lot of really great initiatives with various stakeholders that were in different geographic regions across Virginia. And as you can guess, there's a lot of distance between, say the Hampton Roads, Northern Virginia, down to Southwest Virginia. But all of these initiatives that had sort of sprung up were not connecting with each other primarily because of geography, but also getting a little bit more too isolated. So part of the reason was to create sort of that entity that would help to bring these stakeholders together and collaborate and communicate and to connect, that would have an overall ability to help support and grow the industry. So I think that was a big piece of it, is that we needed to bring all these resources together.
It was pretty clear, at least from the investment side where I was at, making equity deals, that to Tracey's earlier point, there's this huge competence in the Commonwealth. And we were asking ourselves the question, how do we harness that and bring it together? And in my more narrow perspective as an equity investor, I really am looking for unfair advantage. So I lean heavily on Tracey and her team and the know-how and the experts that she brings to our diligence process. So I like to think that my kind of unfair advantage as an investor is really having access to this unique talent set that I think other investors simply don't have. So that's what I find that particularly exciting.
You know, my background is in economic development. So I work for the State of Virginia Economic Development Organization, and I was assigned to the aerospace sector. So I already had connectivity all across the Commonwealth because of that. So it was sort of a natural fit that I could now reach out to all these disparate parts and pieces and try to bring them together in a real positive sense. And so that's sort of why I entered the equation here for CIT.
How about the relationship between the Virginia Unmanned Systems Center and the FAA test site in Virginia?
So Mid-Atlantic Aviation Partnership, which is also running the IPP, or, Integrated Pilot Program. CIT does help to support them, and we were actually the lead entity. Because we are a nonprofit, it could be funneled through us. So we have a very close relationship with them and talk to them on a very regular basis, and they're really a shining star for the Commonwealth of Virginia, really.
So in terms of promoting economic development around UAS, what are some of the current initiatives?
So we've got numerous initiatives, and because we are still fairly new, a lot of this is reaching out to different entities to try to stand up some initiatives and seeing which ones really get legs. So in other words, one of the key initiatives that we're trying to really move forward is to work with the state agencies to develop pilot programs where they could use drones to solve some of their everyday problems or challenges, and, use unmanned systems in a more expeditious or economical or safer way. So we have been discussing, I'll say, the art of the possible with many of the state agencies. Some of them are really leaning forward, like the Department of Homeland Security and Public Safety is making great strides. The Virginia Department of Transportation's got at least 10 projects on the books that they're working on. Some of them are not as familiar with the industry, and it's going to take numerous conversations to really identify which, I'll say, pilot programs we would be able to support for them and that they're interested in doing and that they're learning about. But we really like the state agencies to sort of lead by example and to help show, I'll say, different industry verticals how to use unmanned systems, and therefore help to really grow the customer base. Because if we can get the state agencies to actually procure products and services, at the end of the day, the best incentive would be a good customer base for the industry. So that's one initiative that we're really working on.
The focus then is to encourage state agencies to use the technology, and that will create a demand for services.
Yes. It's really to get them to start using the technology, thereby they become customers for our industry here. And then it sets an example for other, I'll say, industry verticals that could do the same kinds of work that they're doing. Or you could then extend it to the municipalities that maybe need to, inspect water towers or what have you.
How do you increase the awareness of UAS in Virginia?
One of the initiatives that I'm working on is to develop a speakers bureau, because every single time we have a conversation, it always ends up with boiling down to this need for education. And I'm not talking about strictly education as it relates to K through 12 or higher ed, which of course is very important to us, but education of the industry to our legislators, or how the industry works to different sectors of industry, or how do we educate the public and change their sort of perception into a more positive way about the use of unmanned systems. And so I am developing a speakers bureau, and I feel very responsible to make sure that I have put together really correct and consistent content that can be adapted to their audience for them to be able to use. So we are rolling that out in the very near future. And I think that could potentially make some inroads into educating all those different audiences that I was just speaking of, whether they're talking at, I'll say, industry trade associations, or it could be at chamber events or in educational forums or your Rotary Club. We just need to all be good ambassadors for this industry and really help to educate anyone that we are able to come in contact with.
Now, the industry is still very dynamic. As an economic development professional, how challenging is it to form a message that resonates with prospective businesses and customers on the opportunities that are available?
That's an interesting question. And I guess I can do a before and after comparison. It's pretty clear that Virginia had a lot of disparate assets, and it really was, I think, a crying need to bring this all together into one unified voice. 3 years ago, when I first started seriously looking at aerospace deals, including space, before we actually had this part of the portfolio started, we were getting all sorts of random deal flow of different quality levels. And so some of it was from really top flight places like NASA Langley, places that had an affiliation to Virginia Tech's map, et cetera. But if I can just fast forward to present, I'm now getting deal flow from Canada, India, UK, and it's pretty clear people are getting some messaging that says, hey, this is an interesting place. It's partly because it's a good place to come for capital as well. That's one of the key ingredients for the whole souffle here to work. But I'm really seeing a stronger quality in the deal flow, the term that I use, deal flow, the opportunities that we look at for investment purposes. And it's pretty clear to me this didn't happen by accident. The industry is maturing. It's still, from an investment perspective, a very risky asset class with a lot of potential. And I'm also seeing that true for the space side of the whole thesis, which we now have two small sat-related portfolio companies, one of which has deployed the first cellular base station in low Earth orbit. And my point being that I'd like to take credit for this, but this happened not organically. It happened because it was a step function. And I know that we are seeing a different caliber of entrepreneur with a really strong, good commercialization story. So I guess one of the big distinctions I'm seeing is this real emphasis and this trend to move from just a cool point invention to a cultivated commercial argument. And there's an ecosystem here. And so to have a commercial argument, it's not just about the space segment or the autonomous piece that you see on the cover of Popular Science. A lot of it is getting the infrastructure. And, we were talking about the need to have hangars and airspace. And, to your point, Randy, these IPP learnings that happen, all of this goes into de-risking startups. So, from my perspective, this wasn't possible 3 years ago. And we're at a point now where I think, at least credit where it's due, Tracey and her team are really pushing some boundaries here. And then I think that has helped move people out of their comfort levels and sandboxes and to start thinking about this as not just a national aerospace or national business opportunity, but we're now dealing with a class of entrepreneurs that are coming from all over the world. So it's truly a global marketplace. And I think this is a rare opportunity for Virginia to prove itself as a leader here.
A lot of people break the industry down into three areas: hardware, software, and services. How do you see it?
Well, first of all, I should point out that our Unmanned Systems Center, that we are actually responsible for all domains of unmanned systems, so air, land, sea, and space. And so we're not really focused strictly on UAVs. And that really broadens the need for connectivity with all these different stakeholders in these different domains. I think if you almost look at how we brought people onto our advisory board, it kind of explains a little bit of the way that we're looking at the industry. And that would be, I have individuals from all 4 domains on my advisory board. And of course, I have like 3 universities to represent academia and the research and development piece of the industry and the workforce portion. Then I have both large and small industry represented at the table. And then I even have a couple I'll call special assets in Virginia represented, like NASA Langley and certain key assets there as well. So even though I did just recently complete a directory where I was trying to divide the world into service providers, products, and things like that, at the end of the day, it just seemed to me that the best thing would to be bringing the different pieces of the industry together so that you had a better vantage point and perspective of the industry as a whole, instead of trying to really slice it and dice it into different pieces, because all of them are somewhat connected to each other.
What's the ecosystem like for UAS?
It's kind of interesting because really our ecosystem, I mean, if you go back far enough in Virginia, you know, we have such a strong DoD presence up in Northern Virginia. And of course, the unmanned systems started growing out of the military and everything. So that piece of it was already sort of there. And now you're watching some of them try to engage more in commercialization, but you're also able to tap into some of that talent and capabilities and see how that has spawned some additional companies or capabilities in the state. So I just like to mention that Virginia does have this strong government contractors, DoD presence up there in Northern Virginia. So looking at different parts of the state also brings certain capabilities that we want to get our arms around. So Northern Virginia, with their history of defense, DoD capabilities, but you add into that, we have an enormous capability around big data, data analytics, cyber, that is not just in Northern Virginia, but also in Hampton Roads and Central Virginia. And we want to bring that in as a big piece of unmanned systems, because as we all know, it's not necessarily the vehicle, it's the data that they could collect to solve the problems that are needed. So having that capability in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads is, I think, an asset we really need to talk about. Additionally, we have such strong university participation in unmanned systems. And, you know, Virginia already has a very strong higher education system, and each area of the state has really taken great strides to start incorporating a curriculum and capabilities for utilizing unmanned systems to bring to their students. Sometimes, you know, they'll even talk about having, I'll say, drone competitions, et cetera, as a way to just even engage the students in STEM activities, sort of like the cool factor that they're looking for. And then that will bring them on board to do other things in STEM. So our universities have been great partners. I would also say that our Department of Aviation is, of course, very important to everything we do with unmanned systems. And they are right now, you know, using unmanned systems for runway obstruction studies, things like that. But we have quite a number of federal entities around too, or federally funded research entities that can help us with some of the more complicated issues to investigate. Obviously, when you talk about automated vehicles, we have the VTTI, Virginia Tech Transportation Institute, and we have the automated corridors. So we just have a lot of stakeholders. It does get to be a bit like herding cats, but that's a big part of what we're trying to do, is getting people to the same table to start collaborating in a way they hadn't quite done so before, or not as readily.
In May of 2019, the Virginia Unmanned Systems Center created a 24-member advisory board comprised of leaders in the unmanned systems market in Virginia. It includes representatives from economic development organizations, UAS businesses, NASA Langley Research Center, Old Dominion and Virginia Tech universities, the Boeing Company, Drone Up, and many others. I know things are still evolving, and the board has only recently been named. But tell us about it, and what do you hope to establish with them?
I really need them to start to think about what does the Commonwealth need to do to be prepared for when this industry really explodes and takes off. Do we have the sort of processes in place? Do we have the infrastructure in place? I mean, what happens if we get up tomorrow morning and the headline says, great news, the FAA really fast-tracked and they have now integrated unmanned systems into the national airspace, ready, go fly. Well, are we ready for that as a Commonwealth? Like I said, have we given thought to sort of some of the bigger issues and how we need to position ourselves to be ready for that eventuality? So that's sort of I'll say, remember Saturday Night Live with deep thoughts? Well, I need the advisory board to have deep thoughts on what it is we need to do as a Commonwealth, which is sort of different than saying, what do we need to do as an industry? What's our responsibility to the citizens of Virginia to make sure that this new technology can be embraced in a very positive and constructive way?
What are the opportunities for UAS economic development in Virginia?
Well, I think everybody realizes that the industry can and I think will experience very explosive growth and in all domains. So I don't think that there's such a thing as too much discussion on what we need to do to be ready and prepared for that. As far as economic development and attracting companies to come to Virginia or growing our own here, I think my focus right now has been on sort of growing our own, but that is not at the exclusion of looking for opportunity to bring other companies into the Commonwealth. But I think as companies grow and reach a certain size, or they determine that they need a East Coast location to add to their West Coast location, those opportunities will become more frequent. But right now is a lot of focus on how to really maximize and leverage the opportunities that already exist in Virginia with some interesting companies and some early stage startups that Marco gets involved with.
Virginia has a long and rich history of promoting technology. Is UAS viewed as something significantly new, or is it just another technology to work with?
Well, I think we've been sort of fortunate in that the last two administrations, the current administration with Governor Northam and the previous administration with Governor McAuliffe, have been very supportive and pro unmanned systems. And I believe that they have made it very important to their agenda and therefore to the rest of the state to see that Virginia takes a lead in unmanned systems as they see what the future is going to hold. I had a fabulous experience at Exponential just recently because Governor Northam decided to attend along with Secretary of Commerce and Trade and along with our Secretary of Homeland Security and Public Safety. And I had two deputy secretaries there. And they came and they walked the floor and they spoke with companies and they had meetings and we had some receptions, and they were incredibly engaged. And I don't think I could have asked for a better way to really elevate the profile of the industry to key Virginia administration officials. And it was a very, compelling and exciting experience. And I think that has permeated through Virginia. So yes, I think the state is very excited about this industry.
What are some of the challenges in promoting economic development?
Well, I still think one of the biggest challenges is just to grow the customer base. You can set up new companies all day long, but if you can't sustain them because there's no business here, then really and truly that's not going to get you where you want to be. So figuring out how to grow the industry from the point of a customer base, I think, is one of the key things we're trying to do. And I believe we sort of talked about that doing the pilot programs and starting with state agencies and then also trying to really work with industry sectors and present to them the art of the possible that maybe they didn't know existed, and answering some of those basic questions like, well, who do I call if I want to use a UAV to do a certain task? And how much should it cost? And what's legal and what's not legal? legal? I mean, some really basic kinds of questions that, with I think a little bit of effort, can go a long way to bringing what could be some customers to the forefront to actually say, okay, let me go ahead and try something new here that should save me money, should be safer, should be more expeditious. That's probably my biggest challenge right there. And of course, the challenges around policy and maybe making sure that we keep at bay any sort of negative legislation. That's something I rely on our Unmanned Systems Association of Virginia to help with. I mean, I'm sure we have the same challenges as everybody across the country right now. And of course, everybody's anxious for the FAA to ultimately get us integrated into the national air system in a safe manner. So everyone is sort of still trying to keep moving forward and be prepared for that day.
For anyone who might be interested in growing or starting a UAS enterprise in Virginia, what would you say to them?
Just pick up the phone and call and tell us about yourself, all right? And then let us try to figure out the resources that we can bring that could help move your company or whatever forward. If that's funding, let's talk to Marco. If you need some R&D, let me talk to some of my key universities or community colleges. Just go ahead and call and describe what it is you're doing. And then we just take it on a case-by-case basis because we have so many resources around the Commonwealth that are willing and able. All we really need to do is make the connections. So I would not tell anyone to be shy or to hesitate, but just go ahead and reach out.
Marco, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, as Tracey had mentioned, a lot of the building blocks are here. And if there are any missing pieces, we're working on them. I would argue that we may be one of the most advanced states in the country for this asset class that we're talking about. And at the CIT, as part of our mission, we provide feedback to entrepreneurs. And that might not sound like a terribly insightful comment, but if you look at the investment community, most of the investment community is equipped to deploy capital and make good bets on behalf of their investors. And what we do as part of our mission is we not only make investment decisions, but we also, as part of our role as a good steward of the ecosystem, we also tell people what they need to work on. And, building on Tracey's earlier point, one of the imperatives I see is entrepreneurs can do themselves a great service, I think, to think beyond the cool tech. We see a lot of brilliant innovators, and that's a terrific starting point. But there's got to be a compelling business argument. If you're a first-time entrepreneur, I think entrepreneurs need help. And as Tracey mentioned, if one of the areas that we really look for, some sort of aptitude or interest or hunger for selling product. And I really am super excited about what Tracey's doing with the procurement piece, because that's one of the big piece parts that's missing here is, hey, it's one thing to be able to identify a prospective market for your particular business plan. But if there aren't people who are buying or interested in buying, or you don't know how to buy it, or it isn't organized clearly, that puts the entrepreneur at a disadvantage. And I think the whole idea of bringing that information into a repository is certainly extremely helpful. But if I were to say one thing, just one big takeaway for entrepreneurs is be able to think about segueing from your cool tech to selling into a ready, accessible market and start confronting your technology as quickly as possible and get feedback. And we can help with that. We certainly have had a lot of experience in other sectors, whether it's life sciences or energy or software. A lot of that informs what we do in this sector too. At the end of the day, business physics still applies. You still have to sell product to be successful. And I see this as no different. So, and I think this is a great place to be doing that. So to Tracey's earlier point, we lean heavily on each other. And when it's pretty clear, I do not fully understand or appreciate where an entrepreneur is coming from. I tap into her and her team, and that's a huge way to bridge gaps here that in our understanding of what entrepreneurs do in the sector. Because quite frankly, one point that hasn't been said is investors are also being educated, whether they like it or not. This is a learning curve for them as well.
What are the next steps for the Virginia Unmanned Systems Center?
I would like to continue to ramp up all these different initiatives that we have sort of started. I mean, we're just out of the gate with several of them, and it's going to take a lot of work to get them to the point where we feel like, all right, that made a difference and that was a success. So before I come up with more initiatives, I'd really like to make good on the ones that we have going on right now. Now, of course, we're going to also continue to support the IPP because that is a real feather in Virginia's cap. And, we want to make sure that we continue to work in harmony with the FAA to develop policies to, get the unmanned systems integrated into the airspace. And I think that, as I had sort of referred to earlier, I want to make sure that we're looking at the industry from the perspective of what's good for the Commonwealth and the people of the Commonwealth, and make sure that we do everything we can to really be prepared for the future growth of this industry. We don't want to be blindsided or the rug pulled out from under us. We want to be thinking ahead. And that's I think, very much the onus is on us to help to do that for the Commonwealth.
If we fast forward 3 years, what do you hope that you'll be able to say has been accomplished?
Well, I guess I would really like to be able to think that we have not just elevated the industry in terms of, I keep talking about a customer base. Yes, I definitely want that. But I also want to elevate it in a positive fashion so that whether it's industry or the public or the legislators or educational systems here, I want to make sure people understand all the positive things this industry can bring to us. And sometimes we tend to focus on the negative and the controversial and things like that. But I think that those obstacles can be overcome. But I want to make sure people understand how critically important and great this industry can be for all of us.
Building on Tracey's perspective, for me, what looks like a really promising scenario as I canvass the portfolio, and I monitor these companies closely, and we're deeply participatory. But to me, 3 years out, I'd like to have a series of sustainable wins for these little companies. To me, one of the best ways to detect kind of the health and viability of a thesis in an ecosystem is, does it have net new green growth? And if these companies are vibrant and they're growing and they're selling and they're innovating and they're hiring, and some entrepreneurs are exiting and they in turn become new investment sources, to me, that's kind of a barometer for a healthy ecosystem. So I'd be satisfied with small wins, but a very big win would certainly be helpful too. Some people use the metaphor of the pelt on the wall as a success story, and there's nothing like having a big exit in the investment world to validate the thesis. And, again, I say that aspirationally, knowing that there are a whole bunch of risks that can happen and do happen, and it's just the nature of the asset class. But from my perspective, I think if we're having this conversation again in 3 years and we're playing this podcast back, I'd like to be able to cite a name or two or three that says, hey, Randy, here's a couple of companies that a couple of them popped, and one that I thought was going to succeed failed, and one that I thought was going to fail succeeded. That's not unlike what the future, at least my expectation of the future would be.
I can't help but bring up, with an economic development background, of course, I would love to see job creation, capital investment across the board to different parts of the state, and help to provide a better quality of life for Virginians, because this industry has grown in a really positive fashion, and Virginia was able to enjoy the benefits of that.
Tracey, what impresses you most about the center and about the work that you're undertaking?
There is so much we could do. And I don't know if any other states have the wherewithal to have the budget and the personnel and everything else to really do all that could be done in this still nascent industry. But I am just constantly adding to my list of, hey, this is a great idea, or this could be a new initiative, or this person really needs to connect with that person. There's just so much. And that's exciting and daunting and can be overwhelming. But at the end of the day, it's mostly exciting.
And my final question, Tracey, what message would you like to leave regarding the Virginia Unmanned Systems Center and the future of the drone industry?
Well, I just hope that we can continue to expand our role and to make a difference to the Commonwealth and to the businesses that are here and to the citizens that are here, and make sure that we do things that are really well thought out so that we don't, make any, I'll say, critical errors moving forward, as the future is still all being determined by everyone right now. This is not something where we're just following in the footsteps of, but rather leading. And I think that's key for the Unmanned Systems Center, is we are coming into our own to really be leaders in the Commonwealth and share capabilities and share support and recognize where we have stakeholders across the Commonwealth that are just key to the overall success of the industry here.
That's it for episode 217 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Tracey Tynan of the Virginia Unmanned Systems Center and Marco Rubin of the Center for Innovative Technology. I want to thank Tracey and Marco for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about UAS Economic Development in Virginia, or want to connect with Tracey, check out the webpage at vus.virginia.gov. If you're interested in the Pix4D User Conference, check out pix4d.com/radio. And Pix4D is spelled PIX4D. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the costs of production. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate or patreon.com/droneradioshow. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.